My daughter always blushed after bathing, and I thought it was just a quirk. But after the doctor examined her, she made a shocking confession. She was hiding something serious, and the truth shocked me. It changed everything we thought we knew. I can't believe it. It started with something small, something every mother notices but brushes off. My daughter, Chloe, always blushed after her shower. At first, I thought it was just the heat of the water, the natural pinkness that comes from standing under hot steam. But as the weeks turned into months and the blush persisted, a nagging feeling started to creep into my mind, a whisper of doubt that I could no longer ignore. Chloe was 14 when it all began, right in the middle of the awkward teenage years. She was shy, introverted, and seemed to spend most of her time in her room. That wasn't unusual for girls her age. I figured adolescence is a strange, confusing time, and Chloe had always been more sensitive than most. Her father, David, and I had separated when she was 9, and though we tried our best to make things amicable, I knew the divorce had taken its toll on her. I assumed her frequent blushing was just another one of those inexplicable teenage phases, a product of hormones, maybe, or self-consciousness. It wasn't just her cheeks that turned red, though. I started to notice it more and more, her neck, her arms, even the tops of her shoulders. Sometimes, after her shower, her skin would be so flushed it looked almost painful. I'd ask her if she was okay, and she'd always wave me off with a shrug or a nervous laugh. "It's nothing, Mum," she'd say, pulling her bathrobe tighter around herself. "I just like my showers really hot." Still, the redness seemed odd, more intense than it should have been. I googled things like red skin after shower and teenage skin sensitivity, but nothing that came up seemed particularly alarming. I convinced myself that it was normal. Teenagers go through weird body changes all the time. Chloe's always been a bit sensitive to heat, I rationalized. Maybe she's just got delicate skin. But the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. One evening, after Chloe had gone to bed, I mentioned it to David on one of our routine check-in calls. We've maintained a decent co-parenting relationship despite the divorce, and I felt like I needed another perspective, even if he wasn't around Chloe as much as I was. "Does Chloe ever look flushed when she's with you?" I asked, keeping my voice casual, though the concern was clear in my tone. "Flushed?" David echoed, confused. "You mean like after sports or something?" "No, more like after she takes a shower," I clarified. "Her skin gets really red. I've noticed it a lot lately, and I don't know if it's something I should be worried about." David paused for a moment before responding. "I don't think I've noticed that, but I don't see her right after her shower when she's with me. Maybe she just takes long, hot showers like you said." "I don't know," I replied, feeling that familiar twinge of doubt. "It just doesn't seem right." David sighed. "If you're really concerned, why not take her to see a doctor? It's probably nothing, but it couldn't hurt to get it checked out." That idea had been lurking in the back of my mind for a while, but I'd hesitated to act on it. Part of me was afraid of what a doctor might say, afraid that something as innocent as flushed skin might be a sign of something more serious. But David was right. I needed answers, even if it was just to put my mind at ease. The following week, I made an appointment with Dr. Price, our family doctor. Dr. Price had been our physician for years, ever since Chloe was a toddler. He was kind, gentle, and had a way of making even the most nervous patients feel at ease. I trusted him, and I hoped he would have a simple explanation for Chloe's persistent redness. The day of the appointment, Chloe was quiet in the car, fidgeting with the strap of her seatbelt as we drove to the clinic. I could tell she was nervous, but I reassured her that it was just a quick checkup, nothing serious. "It's probably just dry skin or something," I said, trying to keep the mood light. "Maybe you need to use more moisturizer." Chloe didn't say much, just nodded, her face tight with worry. We arrived at the clinic, and after a short wait in the sterile, too bright waiting room, Dr. Price called us in. He greeted us warmly, asked how we'd been, and then got down to business. "So, what seems to be the problem?" Dr. Price asked, glancing at me and then at Chloe. I explained what I had noticed, the persistent blushing, the redness after her showers, the fact that it seemed to be getting worse. Chloe sat quietly beside me, her cheeks already pink with embarrassment. Dr. Price nodded thoughtfully. "Why don't we take a look?" Chloe hesitated for a moment before slowly shrugging off her sweatshirt. I could see the redness creeping up her neck and across her shoulders, even though she hadn't just stepped out of a shower. Dr. Price examined her carefully, his brow furrowing as he looked at her skin. "Does it itch?" he asked. Chloe shook her head. "No, not really." "Does it feel hot or painful?" "Sometimes it feels hot, but it doesn't really hurt," she replied softly. Dr. Price nodded again, then turned to me. "Has this been happening for a long time?" "A few months," I answered. "At first, I thought it was just from the hot water, but it's gotten more noticeable lately." He didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there deep in thought before finally turning back to Chloe. "I'd like to run a few tests, just to rule some things out. It's probably nothing serious, but I'd like to be thorough." My heart sank at the word tests. That's never something a parent wants to hear, even if the doctor is just being cautious. Update. My daughter always blushed after bathing, and I thought it was just a quirk. But after the doctor examined her, she made a shocking confession. She was hiding something serious, and the truth shocked me. It changed everything we thought we knew. I can't believe it. Part 2. I reached over and squeezed her hand. "It's okay, sweetie. We're just being careful." The tests were routine, blood work, allergy screenings, and a few other checks to make sure there wasn't an underlying issue. We left the clinic that day with more questions than answers, but Dr. Price promised to call as soon as the results came in. A few days later, I got the call. Dr. Price's voice was calm, but there was something in his tone that made my stomach twist into knots. "Rachel," he said, addressing me in a way that suddenly felt too personal. "I'd like you to come in. There's something I need to discuss with you and Chloe." The next day, we were back in Dr. Price's office. Chloe sat beside me, biting her lip anxiously as Dr. Price flipped through the results of her tests. Finally, he closed the folder and looked up at us, his expression grave. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, and I could already feel panic rising in my chest. Chloe's test came back normal, but during the examination, I noticed something that I need to address. He paused, his gaze shifting from me to Chloe and back again. "There's no easy way to say this," he continued, his voice soft but steady. "Chloe's skin condition, it's not caused by anything medical." I stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath. "Chloe, your skin's reaction, the redness, the flushing after your showers, isn't due to heat sensitivity or an allergy. It's a response to something else." "What kind of response?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Price hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "I've seen this kind of reaction before in cases of anxiety or emotional distress. It's called flushing syndrome, and it's often triggered by intense emotions, embarrassment, stress, even fear." My mind raced as I tried to process what he was saying. Chloe wasn't sick, there wasn't anything physically wrong with her. "So, it's psychological?" I asked, my voice shaky. Dr. Price nodded. "Yes, in a way. But it's more than that." He turned to Chloe, his expression gentle. "Chloe, is there something you haven't been telling your mother? Something that's been bothering you?" Chloe's face went pale, her eyes wide with fear. She shook her head quickly, but I could tell there was something she was hiding. I turned to her, my heart breaking at the sight of her terrified expression. "Sweetie, it's okay. You can tell us." For a moment, Chloe sat there, silent and trembling. Then finally, the floodgates opened. I didn't want to say anything," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't want to get anyone in trouble." "Trouble?" I repeated, feeling a sense of dread wash over me. "Chloe, what's going on?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with guilt and fear. It's not the showers. It's him." "Him?" I asked, confused. "Who are you talking about?" Chloe hesitated, then with a shaky breath, she whispered, "Dad." My world shattered in that instant. The confession that followed was like something out of a nightmare. Chloe told us everything, how, for months, she'd been dreading her weekends with her father. How he'd become more controlling, more unpredictable. How the things he said, the way he looked at her, made her feel unsafe in ways she couldn't fully explain. It wasn't physical, not yet, but the emotional manipulation, the subtle threats, had taken their toll on her. Every time she came home from his house, she'd rush to take a shower, desperate to wash away the anxiety, the fear, the flushing, the redness. It wasn't from the water, it was from the emotional trauma she'd been carrying alone for so long. I felt like I couldn't breathe as Chloe told her story, and I struggled to hold myself together. How could I not have known? How could I not have seen the signs? Dr. Price was calm, but his expression was grim as he listened. "This is more than anxiety, Rachel," he said softly. "Chloe is showing signs of emotional abuse. You need to act on this immediately." The days that followed were a blur of phone calls, meetings with lawyers, and emotional conversations with Chloe. I filed for an emergency custody order, cutting off all contact between Chloe and her father until the courts could sort out the legalities. I knew it would be a painful road ahead, but I also knew that protecting Chloe was the only thing that mattered now. As for David, he denied everything, of course. He painted me as the overprotective, paranoid mother, and for a while, it seemed like his lies might win out in court. But Chloe's testimony, her bravery in coming forward, was enough to turn the tide. Eventually, the court ruled in our favor, granting me full custody and ordering David to attend counseling before he could even consider supervised visitation. It wasn't the outcome I'd ever wanted, but it was the only one I could live with. Looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed, the subtle changes in Chloe's behavior, the way she flinched when her phone buzzed with a message from her father, the way she'd grown quieter, more withdrawn. I had been so focused on the physical symptoms, so convinced that there was something medically wrong, that I hadn't stopped to consider the emotional toll that was weighing her down. But now, things are different. Chloe is healing, slowly but surely. She's in therapy, working through the trauma, and while we still have a long way to go, I can finally see the light returning to her eyes. She's no longer blushing after her showers, she's no longer hiding. And as for me, I've learned a valuable lesson, one that every parent should take to heart. Sometimes, the signs of distress aren't physical. Sometimes, they're hidden beneath the surface, buried under layers of fear and shame. It's up to us as parents to dig deeper, to ask the hard questions, and to listen, truly listen, to what our children are trying to tell us. Because sometimes, the most shocking confessions come not from the body but from the heart.